Phantasy Star New Genesis is an MMO, and like most MMOs, it has a variety of classes for players to choose from. And with the PS4 release coming up soon, I often see people asking the same question: what class should I play? And the answer is always the same: whatever class you like. This isn't the kind of MMO where teams have to be perfectly balanced to do well, nor is it the kind of game where any class is bad. This game's combat is more oriented towards damage per second, and in that regard, all classes are approximately the same. I'm your host, Slick, and today I will be giving a basic overview of all New Genesis classes to hopefully help new players find what class will be right for them. Hunter is essentially the tank class of the game. Not the kind of tank that holds a shield and protects its allies in battle, but it does have higher hit points and defense than any other class, as you can see from this chart. They can also attract enemy attention with the skill War Cry, and once all the enemies are in place, Hunters can let loose with one of their many high-powered wide area attacks. Hunters can also make use of a skill called Arts Avenger, which boosts the power of photon arts if used right as an enemy hits them. Hunters can also use powerful counterattacks with impressive numbers. A skilled hunter would be able to memorize enemy attack patterns so they can effectively utilize Arts Avenger. If you enjoy bulky classes with wide or strong but slow attacks, then Hunter is the class for you. Fighter is more of a high-risk, high-reward attacking class. The attacks have a much shorter range than Hunters, but they still pack a serious punch.
Pun entirely intended.
Fighter has a number of different ways to chase down its opponent, letting the fight go as long as it wants. A number of skills allow it to dish out major damage when the enemy is at its most vulnerable. Fighter can also get a big boost of power from the skill Overload, which increases potency by 20% but also doubles incoming damage. So a skilled fighter should use counterattacks to defend themselves effectively while using Overload to rip the enemy to shreds. If you enjoy nimble classes with high but focused attack power, then Fighter is the class for you.
PSC Climax.
Ranger is a gun-wielding support class. It supports allies with a skill called Blight Rounds, which marks a part of the enemy and increases all damage done to that part. And if the part gets hit enough times, the effect gets stronger. This effect can also be applied to crowds of enemies with wide-range Blight Rounds. While supporting everyone, Rangers can deal some major damage on their own. Assault Rifles also have an added mechanic called Optimal Distance, where standing a certain distance from your target increases damage by 20%. When the targeting marker turns orange, you're at the optimal distance. A skilled Ranger is able to hold this optimal distance while keeping Blight Rounds active for as long as possible. If you enjoy supporting allies from a distance, or simply enjoy guns, then Ranger may be the best class for you. Gunner is a gun-wielding attack class whose damage is done in bursts. Gunner has a skill called Chain Trigger, which can only be used by the class's twin machine guns. It starts by using a charged photon art. This activates a counter that goes up every time you hit an enemy to a max of 100. You finish the chain trigger by using another charged photon art, and your attack will be much stronger based on how high the counter was. Other skills available to Gunner can shorten the cooldown time of chain trigger and even speed up attacks based on how high the counter is when you use your finisher, meaning Gunner is best suited for longer battles. Also, twin machine guns have an optimal distance mechanic just like the assault rifle, but machine guns like to be up close and personal to their target. So a skilled gunner can evade enemy attacks while keeping its chain trigger and its bonuses active. If you enjoy fast classes that deal big bursts of damage, then Gunner may be the class for you. Force is essentially the high-powered magic class of the game. With a variety of techniques, Forces are able to adapt to just about any situation you put them in. It has a number of skills to bolster its strength, such as Technique Domination, which increases tech damage against downed enemies, Photon Flare, which increases damage for a limited time, and Photon Flare Short Charge, which shortens the charging time of techniques. The Rod can negate attacks with its weapon action, and doing so lets you shoot a photon bullet when using another tech. Each element also has a special skill that can increase damage when certain conditions are met. And most importantly, Forces are able to use super powerful compound techs that can completely sweep the area of enemies. With a number of ways to conserve photon points, a skilled force is able to keep the battle going without ever needing to rest. If you enjoy high-power magic classes, then Force may be the one for you. Techer is an up-close support class, and despite the name, techs are not what it's good at. Techer is able to use Shifta Deban to increase allies' attack and defense power, along with a number of other useful buffs. Techer is valuable in parties as Shifta Deban can be applied to party members no matter how far away they are. And Techer has a skill called Overemphasis, which fully recovers photon points and hit points and increases photon points by 50 to party members only. As far as combat goes, Techer is better off using normal attacks and photon arcs than it is techniques. These attacks are accompanied by bonus damage called Photonic Fury. This bonus damage can have its element changed by using a charged technique, so there you go. It can also guard and counter to defend itself in battle, so skilled Techers are able to lay a serious beat down on enemies while regularly buffing allies. If you enjoy support classes that can actually fight back, then Techer is definitely the one for you. Earlier I said teams don't have to be balanced to do well, and overall that's relatively true. However, many would consider the support provided by Techer and by extension Ranger to be serious game changers. So if by the end of this video you're still unsure what you want to play, you might want to consider playing Ranger or Techer to give support to anyone who needs it. Braver is a versatile attack class that can switch between melee and ranged attacks, the weapons in question being the katana and the bow. The bow is strong and has a number of damage over time effects. And while I said all classes are pretty even when it comes to DPS, some would argue that katana just is the best one. It's got powerful photon arcs, a strong special attack with incredible reach, 2 different counters, and a skill that releases a large blast of damage that recovers photon points. This skill can be used with the bow, by the way. A skilled Braver is able to combine these effects and use them at the right time to ensure massive damage. If you enjoy lightweight, powerful attack classes, then Braver is right up your alley. Bouncer is an attack class with a special kind of support. New Genesis has a special status called Down, which by and large can be applied to bosses and other large enemies. Every attack in the game has a hidden value called a down factor. Once enough down factor is accumulated, the enemy is downed and is completely vulnerable to an onslaught of attacks. Bouncer has special debuffs that can increase the amount of down factor gained depending on which weapon you're using. Soaring Blades can increase physical down factor, whereas Jet Boots can increase elemental down factor. For combat, Soaring Blades are able to use a number of long-range melee attacks to keep checks on any enemies that are moving a little too much. Jet Boots are able to integrate techs into their strategy, evade attacks with powerful counters, and even unleash one of the strongest attacks in the game as long as the opponent stands still. A skilled Bouncer is able to keep the special debuffs active while knowing exactly when to unleash their strongest attacks. If you're a fan of classes with unique support, then you may want to give Bouncer a try. Waker is a new class that can adapt to a wide variety of situations. Their photon arts summon familiars that can unleash a variety of attacks. Fredren uses long-range attacks, Wolfen uses short-range attacks, and Marmello can protect you from damage and then be thrown as a bomb. Hitting the enemies enough times will mark them with the treble clef. You can leave this as is to increase potency and down factor, or you can detonate it to increase gear gauge for one of your familiars. Once Fredren and Wolfen have acquired enough gear, you can use a powerful unison attack. You can also hold down the Photon Art button to change how your familiars attack. A skilled Waker can strategically combine all of these abilities to either sweep up crowds of enemies or lay a serious beating on one pesky boss. If you enjoy classes with a wide variety of combat options, you may want to look into Waker. When deciding what skills to teach your class, look for skills that can only be used with your main class or with certain weapons, as indicated by this yellow text. These are the real game changers that can improve your combat ability, and in most cases are how you activate the abilities we've talked about throughout this video. You may find 2 skills at the top of the skill tree that have 15 or 10 levels to them that do not have the aforementioned yellow text. These are nice bonuses, but do not focus on them until you're satisfied with your weapon and main class skills. In New Genesis, you're also allowed to set a subclass. This gives your main class access to your subclass's skills, weapons, photon arts, and techniques if applicable. But do take note that your subclass's weapons will deal 10% less damage. Your subclass's level and stats have no effect on your main class, so you're able to experiment with different subclasses until you find something that works for you. Selecting a subclass can be based on a variety of properties such as enhancing a class's strengths, covering a class's weakness, adding combat variety with new weapons, or even trying out another class's weapon to see if you'd like to level up that class. As subclasses, in addition to some weapon skills, Hunter increases damage resistance and Fighter increases power against downed enemies. Ranger can help protect you from status ailments, and Gunner can increase photon point recovery when attacking. Force improves natural PP recovery and recovers more when nearby enemies are defeated, and Techer improves photon blast gauge gain. However, most people consider Techer to be the worst subclass, so you may want to avoid that if possible. Braver increases healing from rest design, and Bouncer increases down factor and increases attack and defense when enemy parts are broken. Lastly, Waker can improve defense and healing when your hit points start getting low. While combat customization is seemingly limitless, allow me to give you some ideas using class sets that have worked for me in the past. Hunter may find itself on the receiving end of a lot of damage. By setting Braver as a subclass, you can increase how much you heal yourself, letting you stay in the fight longer. Fighter weapons seem to drain photon points quickly. By setting Gunner as a subclass, you can quickly recover those photon points by using your normal attacks. Powerful enemies called Gigantics can drop armor that increases your power, but greatly reduces your status resistance as well. Setting Ranger as a subclass can dampen this weakness and reduce how long ailments affect you. Gunner Photon Arts got you draining your photon points? Setting Force as a subclass can increase your natural PP recovery in conjunction with an active PP recovery from normal attacks. Force has a skill that increases tech damage against downed enemies. Setting Fighter as a subclass can increase this effect even further. Techer's Wand's Photonic Theory can inflict elemental down. Setting Bouncer as your subclass makes it even easier to inflict. While Braver has a skill that can instantly recover a lot of photon points, it's not always available and you may not get its full effect. And since the photon arts can seriously drain your photon points, setting Gunner as your subclass to increase normal attack's photon point recovery makes a lot of sense. Bouncer's jet boots are able to integrate techniques into their strategy, but learning those special tech skills on the Bouncer tree reduces how many Bouncer skills you can actually learn. By setting Force as your subclass, you can gain access to those skills from the Force tree, as well as access to a bunch of other PP recovery skills. Waker has a skill called Resta Effect Continuance that reduces the initial heal from Rest Design but gives you a special healing over time effect that in the long run heals more than a Rest Design normally would. Setting Braver as a subclass increases that initial healing to give you more health right off the bat. Today we've only covered the class's basics. Simple though they may seem, each class has a deeper complexity to them. Between the abilities at their disposal, the combinations they could pull off, and the best way to combine both. I encourage you to experiment with different classes to see what fits you best, and don't be afraid to change main classes late in the game. I've actually done that a few times myself. Remember, there is no correct class, or more accurately, the correct class is the one with which you have the most fun. If you found this video informative, I'd recommend subscribing and checking out my channel for more useful information on Phantasy Star New Genesis.